Carney teases his leadership run while cracks appear in Team Canada. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
All the news you need to know.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
It's one of the worst kept secrets in Canadian politics that Mark Carney wants to be the next leader of the Liberal Party and Prime Minister of Canada. The former central banker's name has come up dozens of times as a potential Liberal candidate over the last several years. And now with Prime Minister Trudeau leaving the scene, Mark Carney has his opening. And he found a friendly interviewer last night in Jon Stewart to introduce himself to Canadians who watch The Daily Show. Carney was asked by Stewart about one of the big news stories these days, Trump's talk of making Canada the 51st state.
What are they making up there of the overtures and sort of trolling to Canada about being a part of the United States?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is not going to happen. That the overture. I mean,
because you don't want.
Well, we're we're proud. We find you very attractive, but we're not moving in with you. It's not you. It's us. We do things a little differently in Canada. We believe in.
I just want to, before you go any further, I'm up for it. We're up for it. Whatever you do differently, we want to experiment too. What do you guys want?
We can be.
You want like
we can be friends. There can be a few benefits, John. Friends with benefits, but not. We're not going to commit all the way. Benefits of trade, benefits of defense.
Right.
And the two talked about another big story, the Liberal leadership race, and whether Carney would run for the leadership. So
right now there is turmoil. Trudeau has resigned.
Yes.
There will be new elections. Do you know when the new elections are?
They have to be by October. Okay. They could come sooner.
Sooner than October?
Sooner than October, yes.
Now, what would be the trigger of the election sooner?
Well, it would be likely the choice of the current governing party, which is the Liberal Party.
And you are of the Liberal Party?
I am of the Liberal Party, yes.
Are they looking for a new leader?
I think they might be, John.
Sir, may I recommend to you, with your charm and debonair wit, yet strong financial backbone, that you offer yourself have you offered yourself as leader?
I just started thinking about it when you brought it up.
Just now?
Yeah, just now.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. An official announcement from Mark Carney is expected sometime this week, probably Thursday, that he's running for the Liberal leadership. Chrystia Freeland, the former finance minister, expected to make it official next week. In other Liberal leadership race news, former BC Premier Christy Clark is out. She says there's not enough time and that her French isn't up to the job of being the Liberal leader. She's going to work on it. And Karina Gould is in. She's been the government's House leader and represents the Ontario riding of Burlington. Meantime, in less than a week, Donald Trump will be sworn in as U.S. president and start his second term, and he has promised to impose punishing tariffs on Canada. And in this country, that has led to various reactions. The Liberals in Ottawa are said to be preparing a list of American goods subject to counter tariffs. And there's been talk of cutting off or restricting energy exports to the United States, like electricity from Ontario, but also oil and gas from the West. And that idea, Ottawa limiting oil and gas exports from Alberta to the United States, is a total non-starter for the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, who said it could create a national unity crisis.
Well, I can't predict what Albertans would do, but as you know, the part of my strategy over the last 2 years has been to say that we can have a constructive relationship with Canada, and I would hope that would continue to be the case. Here's the thing I find irritating about Eastern politicians making that argument. The reason I find it irritating is because we could have had Energy East, which would have expanded our ability to support our friends in Eastern Canada and also been an export market off the East Coast. We could have had Northern Gateway, which would have expanded and supported export markets in a more substantial way off the West Coast. And Eastern politicians advocated against those things. And so we went to work on expanding our access to the United States with additional egress, with twinning, with looping. We did that because the rest of the country wasn't interested in having that conversation. So to now make the argument that that's a point of leverage is going to be very, very irritating, not only to me, but also to my fellow Albertans. If they want to start the conversation by saying, gosh, maybe we should have had Energy East and Northern Gateway, let's restart that so that we're not so dependent on one customer, I am more than happy to have that conversation.
But that position saying no to using energy as leverage in a trade battle with the Americans is not going over well with the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, who has threatened to cut off electricity exports to northern U.S. states.
Well, that's Danielle Smith. She's speaking for Alberta. She's not speaking for the country. I'm speaking for Ontario. That's going to get hurt a lot more. They aren't going to go after the oil. They're coming after Ontario. Let's be very clear about this. And we're going to make sure that we do everything we can to protect Ontarian jobs. And that's, I guess, everyone has their opinion in the country.
With the chaos in the Liberal Party in Ottawa, with the prorogation of Parliament, it's been Premier Smith and Ford taking the lead on making the Canadian pitch, mainly on American cable news networks. And the two will be part of a First Minister's meeting tomorrow. Ford is suggesting the Liberals aren't focused enough right now on the threat of these tariffs,
well, when I go
which he
to,
says could cost Ontario 500,000 jobs.
Well, when I go to Ottawa and I sit down and speak to the Prime Minister on Wednesday, keep in mind, folks, this is their jurisdiction. They need to come up with a strong plan. They need to be doing everything every single day to make sure we avoid these tariffs. They need to be showing the people of Canada that they're doing something on the border. And to be very frank, their new minister, I haven't seen hide nor hair of them. They said they're putting a $1.3 billion fund together for our border. What's the plan? What's the plan for the tariffs when they come? We need to make sure that as long as they're in office, as long as the Prime Minister, he has to go full steam ahead. And so does his border security person. I think Minister McGuinty, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's David McGuinty. Where is he?
Prime Minister Trudeau is in Ottawa today. He has no public events scheduled. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know on News Radio.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
Well, we have a lot to talk about today, not a lot of time, so let's jump right into things with Professor Ian Lee here for his weekly appearance on our show. He's with the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. How are you?
Good afternoon, Rob. I'm doing very well, thank you.
That's good. So Trump's inauguration is less than a week away. Let's talk about this tariff threat. The Liberals preparing a list of American goods for counter tariffs.
Yeah.
There's talk of an energy embargo already meeting fierce resistance in places like Alberta. What are your thoughts on retaliatory tariffs?
I think they're beyond delusional.
Okay.
I just think they've just gone over the cliff, the Liberals, and I'll explain why. Because I'm always evidence-based with data. The United States has a $28 trillion GDP economy. It is the largest economy on planet Earth. The Chinese don't even come close, and they're number 2. Europe doesn't even come close. It's even less close. It's number 3. And the gap is getting larger each year. In other words, the U.S. is pulling away from the rest of the world because it's so dynamic, so productive. We're $2.5 trillion. So what the Liberals are telling us, and other people that support this, is we're going to get into a trade war with an economy that is over 10 times bigger than us. And they think we're going to win. I understand arithmetic. Maybe they don't. I do understand arithmetic. I do understand that $28 trillion is vastly, vastly larger than $2.5 trillion. Pierre Trudeau got it right 50 years ago. He understood the power imbalance, the economic power imbalance between the two countries. He never went around telling everybody, "Oh, we're just equal to the States. We're going to stand up, and toe to toe, mano a mano." He never talked like that. He said that the United States was a 2-ton elephant, and we're a mouse. And he used the word mouse. Now, everybody understands that mice are not 2 tons in size. They're tiny little things that go squeak, squeak. And the idea that we can get into a trade war with this colossus, the largest economy in the world that all the other economies are subservient to, whether people like it or not. Chinese RMB is driven by the value of the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar drives the value of all the other currencies, not the other way around.
So if not that, retaliatory tariffs, then what?
Exactly what Daniel Smith is doing. She said, "I'm going down there. I'm going to talk to him about a deal." I just understand, Rob, I mean this. I'm not being unkind. I just don't get it that the answer is sitting on their damned nose. The last time Trump was in office, what did the Trudeau Liberal government do? They negotiated a new CUSMA deal. Have you heard one person anywhere involved with the government of Canada, the Liberal government of Canada, saying, "Guys, why don't we talk to him? This is the guy who wrote a book called The Art of the Deal." Trump sees himself as a deal maker. So what are we doing? Are we suggesting let's go down there and start dealing? Hell no, man. Let's get into a fight with Donald Trump. Let's get into a trade war and they're 10 times more than 10 times bigger than us. Like this, it's not just delusional. It's just downright stupid. I mean, stupid in the fullest meaning of the word stupid. They are not analyzing, in fact, what we've done since we've had a trade agreement with the United States going back to 1988. And then we did it in 93, we did NAFTA. And then we did a new one under Trudeau in, I think it was 2017 or 18. And there's another one required in 2026 in the current agreement. So, I mean, we've had trade agreements with the U.S. In fact, we've had them way before 88. If you go back to the Auto Pact in 1965, negotiated between Pearson and Lyndon Johnson, that was really the first trade deal we had with the U.S. So that's over a half a century. We've got long experience. So what are they doing? They want to put on their macho, their progressive liberal, toxic masculinity hat and say, we're going to go a mano with Donald Trump and punch him in the nose. I mean, this is idiotic. This is going to lead to great destruction of us.
Right. And you've said before then so we should open up protected industries, supply managed agriculture,
let's talk
banking,
I think
airline,
so, but let's
telecom,
go and find
whatever.
out and have our best people down there, our best public servants. This is what has been advocated actually by a couple of people. Our best public servants down there under a Team Canada approach. I would have the premiers down there. I wouldn't, because the Liberals have demonstrated such, and I'm talking the cabinet leaders, including Trudeau himself, have demonstrated such confusion. I mean that on this file. And, of course, Trudeau was standing up saying that the American people made a huge mistake in electing Donald Trump, which was really harmful.
It was really dumb.
What we need to do is have maybe Daniel Smith and Ford, and I realize they don't agree on this, but I'd rather have those two leading a trade delegation of distinguished business people and trade negotiators from the public service, and to go down and meet with Trump and his people, maybe the day after he's in office. I don't know. I mean, but very, very soon. Very soon.
Right.
Very soon. Finding out,
all right.
Okay, what
do you want?
Do you want to do a deal?
What's up for negotiation? Yeah, what's
up
for
negotiation?
negotiation?
Why don't we try talking to them? All I've heard are threats on the Canadian side about retaliatory trade measures.
All right. When we come back, what do you think of this idea of economic union with the United States, an economic union between Canada and the United States, like the EU? O'Leary's down there pitching that to the president. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
There is no question Rob won't get answered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues
on News Radio.
Here with Professor Ian Lee from Carleton University. What do you think of this idea of an economic union with the United States?
I may surprise you. I don't completely agree. I partially agree, and I want to make a very clear distinction with Kevin O'Leary because, and I respect Kevin O'Leary as a business person, okay? He's not an economist, neither am I, by the way, but at least I study economic theory. And let's not put down economic theory. It's too easy to do that when there's some serious economists out there that have won Nobel Prizes. Here's where I'm going. If we understand by an economic union a common trade area, as the Europeans did from roughly 1960 to 2000 when they created the euro, if we mean by that all goods travel without any tariffs whatsoever, no exceptions, no protected industries, none, zip, zero, but each country keeps its separate currency, then I agree. If they're proposing putting a one common currency, which, let's be clear, it means the U.S. dollar, okay? And this is not nationalism. Yes. Robert Mundell, a brilliant Canadian who was at Columbia University for 40 years, won the Nobel Prize for his work on common currency agreements. And his advice, and it's been held up ever since by reality, is that a common currency between different countries works if they are at the same level of productivity and inflation and GDP growth, etc. In other words, if there's a lot of economic structural similarities. If you have a stronger country and a weaker country, what you have is Greece and the pigs of Southern Europe. Because what happens is that they end up getting, as the Germans very put it correctly, by joining the euro, what Greece got was German prices, but Greek productivity, and it was catastrophically bad. And I've argued ever since. I've said to the Poles, don't be crazy and join the EU, but not the euro, because I said the Germans are way, way more competitive than you are, and you'll end up being in the position Greece was in. So you want a common market with complete free flow of goods, no tariffs, but you don't want a common currency. Yes, Austria and France and Germany, because they have very similar economic levels of productivity and prosperity and so forth. That works for them. Okay. But you can't have weaker countries in the same, because what happens is they get bled dry. And that's what happened to the southern countries of Europe, and there's still huge imbalances between the north and the south of Europe. So no to a common currency, yes to a common market.
Okay. I think that's going to have to be our time for today, because if we get into the Liberal leadership race, we would need another half an hour with you. But there'll be lots of time for that, I think. So,
it's going to be smaller
again.
than everybody thinks. There's my takeaway. Yeah. I think there's going to be a maximum 4 candidates.
Okay. We'll see how it shakes out. Thank you, Professor. Speak soon.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Great.
Yeah, Professor Ian Lee from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. This every Tuesday here on Now You Know. Our Newsday panel is coming up right after the news. The latest breaking news at the bottom of the hour. This is News Radio.
You have questions.
Now You Know with Rob Snow has the answers.
On News Radio, the Newsday panel.
And the gang's all here with a lot to cover today. It's time for the Newsday panel. Jordan Piquette is senior consultant at Blue Sky Strategy Group in Ottawa. Although the last time we checked in with him, he was in Florida. Are you back from Florida? Or are you still in Florida?
I am,
What's the deal?
unfortunately, back in snowy capital now.
Yes, okay. And Andrew Brander is here, Vice President at Crestview Strategy, who usually joins us from the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. How are you, Andrew?
Still in Toronto, still Ontario, and still Canada.
Where you're bracing for a healthy 7% property tax increase, courtesy of Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow. So I guess that's better than last year. All right, now lots of developments to talk about in the Liberal leadership race. Why don't we start right there? Mark Carney did an interview with Jon Stewart on the Daily Show. Andrew, what did you think of that decision? First of all, to go on the Daily Show. Carney does the Daily Show. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, appropriate to me as it seems that the race is becoming a bit of a joke. Honestly, I watched the clip and I thought it was quite funny. So if that was his objective, mission accomplished. If the objective was to speak to liberal elites, that's probably a good audience for it. And if the objective was to be discussed on shows like this, like yours, as the topic of the day, then I mean he can check that box as well. But I will say, in all seriousness, I think there's a time and a place in the political discourse and the job for comedy. I would suggest now is not the time, and an American TV show right now is not the place. To me, it demonstrated a lack of self-awareness, something that has sort of all the regular characteristics and fingerprints of a Jerry Butts type strategy. And demonstrates once again that Carney really isn't all that different than Justin Trudeau, who of course completed his own rounds of comedy shows and American television networks himself this past month.
All right, Jordan Piquette, what did you think just of the decision itself? Let's do the Daily Show.
Yeah, just building on something Andrew just referenced. I mean, this is kind of the Team Trudeau strategy. If you really go back to the first of the days, it's look at our guy. He can generate interest. He's a celebrity. People in Hollywood like him. He's famous. Look at Canada being all big on the world stage. So it's kind of unfortunate for a Canadian political leader now that part of checking that box is how popular you can be with American talk shows. So agree. Interesting strategy. It did obviously generate some talking points, and we're here talking about it now. Sure. But it's going to also rightly generate some criticisms, and I would expect you'll start to see Chrystia Freeland's camp starting to push back pretty heavily on some of this quite soon.
Okay, how did he do? How would you say he performed on the Daily Show, Andrew? Why don't you take that one?
As I said, look, I mean, if you're watching it at a different time, in different circumstances, right now, I thought he was quite funny and entertaining. Like he was a good guest for them to get. Again, a little bit baffled in terms of who exactly he was trying to speak to, but. It's garnering the interest there. When I missed it last night, but I watched it online today, and it had over 600,000 views on YouTube. I'd imagine the lion's share of those are coming from north of the border. And so if he's looking for an arena to sort of reintroduce himself, then perhaps he was looking for less hard-hitting questions and to create some distance from the problems here at home. But I'd say, those seem to follow him. Stewart still asked him pretty extensively about his past roles advising Trudeau, his history presiding over Canada's economic policies, and his advocacy around the carbon tax. So, he still faced some challenges when trying to sort of wrangle out of some awkward questions.
Okay, how did you think he did, Jordan?
Yeah, I didn't get to review the entire clip yet, but just kind of some of the things I've seen. Typically, I mean, just kind of standard vanilla politician. They're chatting. I mean, it was kind of just typical political interview with a hint of comedy. I think it was fine. But at the end of the day, he's as Andrew said, coming out of the scene, very, very new right now, trying to reintroduce himself to Canadians. So I think that was certainly what he was trying to portray. Was that he's just some average run-of-the-mill guy who has an extensive resume. So now Canadians should give him another look. But I don't think every single Canadian is going to watch that. I think it's more for the chattering classes to look and see how much interest he can generate.
Okay. When we come back, a few more questions about Carney, and we'll talk about who's in, who's out. Big out today. Christy Clark. I'm out of here. So that's a big name who has decided that the time is not right and the conditions are not right for a run for the Liberal leadership. Was that a case of self-sabotage for Christy Clark? When we come back, I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know on News Radio.
No question goes unasked or unanswered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow returns on News Radio.
Back with our Newsday panelists today, Jordan Piquette from Blue Sky Strategy Group and Andrew Branders in Toronto today. He's with Crestview Strategy, vice president there. This idea of Mark Carney trying to convince people I'm the outsider. I'm the former governor of the Bank of Canada, former governor of the Bank of England, advisor to the Liberal Party on economic policy, but I'm really the outsider in that I haven't been part of the elected government for the last 9 years. How do you think he's doing in making that case? Andrew, what do you think? Mark Carney, outsider.
He's trying. Look,
he's trying.
I mean, I think it's really telling just how much damage Trudeau has done to the party that not just Mark Carney, but the two leading prospective candidates are going to such great lengths to run away from their ties to Trudeau. They're showing just about as little consideration for him as Trudeau showed to them during that chaotic cabinet shuffle, which obviously led us to this point. The problem, of course, in all of this is what that message is sending to Canadians, right? We're now a week away from the possibility of President Trump's executive orders. The two leading contenders to replace the Prime Minister are more worried about their jobs and their future than any one of the hundreds of thousands of Canadian jobs and futures that will be impacted, damaged, or destroyed because of these tariffs. And I think because of that, it's a poison chalice for either of them. And I'm not sure why anyone would want to run for this job at this time.
Okay. Jordan, Mark Carney, outsider. How does he prosecute that case?
It's going to be a tough one for him. He's been right there at the table the whole time. I mean, joined the Liberal team. They had a big press release about it as the economic advisor on the party side. He's been advising everywhere. He's been inside the banking systems, financial systems of several different countries now. And he just travels in the elite circles. So he's going to be twisting himself into knots on this. It's going to be entertaining to watch, frankly, over the next bit. And if he is successful, which seems to be the bulk of the Liberal establishment starting to line up behind him, just wait for the Conservative attack ads to start unleashing on him. Immediately after that, they had that stinging effect back on Ignatius, and the same thing is going to happen again. Except there's just much more ammunition out there for his opponents to use this time around.
Didn't come back for you. He didn't come back for you. Okay. Christy Clark tried to come back. It didn't last very long. And there will be people who will think she blew her own campaign up when she didn't come clean about having a Conservative Party membership. Sure, she's out. She says there's not enough time, and her French isn't up to the job, which, as I mentioned to you, actually, Jordan, just last week, I didn't think it would be up to the job. But nevertheless, are you shocked to hear that, Andrew, that she's dropped out, or did you expect that?
Look, I mean, I think the damage she did to herself, I think she made the same calculation that I just outlined, which is, whoever's running for this leadership this round is going to have to wear the results of that after the next election, and I would assume pretty immediately go through a leadership review process and another round of this. So perhaps Christy Clark, made the decision that would be the better time to run. However, given her stumble out of the block this time, I can't imagine that this isn't something that follows her into the next race again. So, I'd really be considering looking at other options at this point.
Okay, very quickly. Batiste from Cape Breton Island, like longest of long shots, and Gould, Karina Gould, Burlington area. I would put this out there. I'd like to know whether both of you agree or not. These people should be more concerned about winning their own ridings in the next election, not becoming prime minister for a few days. If I were either of those people, I would be like, it's time to save the furniture, and not be prime minister. But anyway, that's how I see it. These are maybe I don't know, name recognition building exercises and really nothing more for people like Batiste and Gould. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would. Look, I think that might be exactly what they're trying to do, in fact. You recall, Rob, I used to work for Lisa Raitt, ran her campaigns, her 3 election campaigns. In 2015, Lisa just hung on by about 1,000 votes. Shortly after the Conservatives found themselves in a leadership race, Jordan, of course, found himself working for the interim leader, Rona Ambrose, at the time. But I remember one of Lisa's main considerations was, if I don't run for leader, I know I'm going to lose next time. And so, it might just be, if nothing else, something that just helps raise their public profile just enough for them to hang on to their seats.
Okay. Do you agree, Jordan?
Absolutely. That's exactly what this exercise is. They're just running to boost a network across the country. They don't, to use Trudeau's phrase, have a snowball's chance in hell of a winning. But this is simply just exactly, that's what it is. Build their network, build their profile, and hopefully become more of a household name. Because right now they're just not.
I'd like to know where they're getting the $350,000. Holy cow!
And that they may not
because
hit that threshold. And that's often what happens with some of these sort of also ran candidates. That's when it gets time to actually filter out.
So you would expect maybe next week we're seeing statements from Batiste and Gould is, well, I tried, but I'm out because I can't raise the money. Okay. All right. When we come back, Ontario election speculation. Is Doug Ford going to call a snap election? If he does, how does that complicate things on the federal scene? When we come back, this is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow. It's News Radio.
Critical thinking is not dead.
Now You Know with Rob Snow
Returns on News Radio.
With Jordan Pickett and Andrew Brander, our Newsday panelists today. So let's talk about the on-again, off-again Ontario election speculation. First, I thought there's going to be an early election, and then I thought, there's not going to be an early election, and now I think there might be an early election again. If Doug Ford calls a snap election because he says he needs a mandate to stimulate the Ontario economy because of the damage that will be done by Trump tariffs, how does that complicate the federal election scene? Andrew?
I think it's much more complicated the other way around, in the sense that if there was a federal election before Doug Ford got the chance to call a snap election, that would complicate that decision. I think the federal train has left the station, if you will, at that point. So really for Doug Ford, it comes down to him making the decision on whether it's easier to justify having that election before or after. I think it becomes a lot harder to justify a provincial election if he's caught behind on the other end of a federal election. And if he misses that window, then, he almost certainly gets locked into the fixed election date, which is about 14 months away.
Okay.
And remember, that will be happening then after a year of what we presume will be a federal conservative government, which has promised, spending control and there's going to be job impacts there. It's going to be a year after the tariffs and an escalating trade war. Job impacts there as well that, the premier certainly hasn't shied away from saying, I'm going to take this on and own some responsibility about that. And it's another full year that the RCMP has to conduct their investigation. So,
Okay.
I don't know why Ford would have any cold feet on pulling the trigger early.
What do you think, Jordan?
Agreed. I think he has no qualms about going early. I think it's totally justified jumping in now. It's not that even if there was some overlap with the federal election. We've seen other provincial elections happen at the same time as the federal side. It won't make a difference. There's some volunteers that are duplicates on all sides, but it seems now more of the complication is on the Liberal leadership race and some of Bonnie Crombie's team now abandoning her to go and work for one of these leading campaigns.
Oh, really? Okay. All right. So the good money would be on a snap election then, like soon.
I would put it on. Yeah.
Andrew, yeah.
I think so. I think probably within a few weeks.
Within a few weeks, Ontario election within a few weeks. Okay, very interesting. Well, look, thank you so much for today. We shall see what tomorrow brings.
Thanks, Rob.
We'll speak soon.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Jordan Piquette, senior consultant at Blue Sky Strategy Group in Ottawa today, and Andrew Brander, vice president with Crestview Strategy, and he is based in Toronto. Coming up right after the news at the top of the hour, it's Talkback. 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. Hot topic today, national unity. No, our focus is not Quebec. It's Alberta. National unity with an Alberta focus. When we come back on Talkback, your calls, please. I'm Rob Snow. It's Now You Know. It's News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. And today's topic, national unity. And the reason we want to jump back into this topic today is not because of Quebec, but rather because of the West and because of what we're hearing from Alberta. And here are some questions for you to think about, for you to consider, for you to give us a call, share your opinion, and hopefully, these will serve to get the conversation going at 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Why are people in Alberta so mad at the government in Ottawa? Why are people in Alberta so mad at the government in Ottawa? What's behind that? What's driving that? Just how seriously should it be taken in Eastern Canada? This idea of Alberta separating from Canada, how serious should we take that in Eastern Canada? Alberta separation. Is that just an idea that is held by, say, a small minority of people? Is it, do you think it's growing? More people are looking at that as maybe an option? Alberta separates from Canada? Is it something do you think we should be concerned about in this part of the country? See, we are coming to you from the National Capital Region today. David is on the Ottawa side of the Ottawa River, and I am on the Quebec side of the Ottawa River. So we're not out there. So we need your help. We are asking for your help so we can better understand and appreciate the current sentiment. 1-833-668-2577. Anger in Alberta. What is wrong? Is it a liberal thing? Is it because of the liberal government in Ottawa with a prime minister named Trudeau and an environment minister named Guilbeault? That there's this idea they look down on Alberta, or they take Alberta for granted, or think Alberta is backward and the problem child of Confederation. That these are liberals from Eastern Canada and they just don't get Alberta and they don't want to help Alberta because there are no votes out there. Anything to that? What would you say? Do you think the situation would improve relations between Alberta and Eastern Canada if there was a Conservative government? If the Conservatives win the next election, for example, what would you say? 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. You see, in Quebec, the separatist movement is all about language and culture. Language and culture. The French language, the Quebecois culture. They feel it's under threat and that it's been under threat for 400 years. In your opinion, is there some kind of cultural divide between Alberta and Eastern Canada? In other words, is there something about the culture of Alberta that people in Eastern Canada just don't get? And if there is, what is that? What is it about people in Eastern Canada that we are misunderstanding about Alberta? Help us understand this. Talk some sense into us. Another reason we wanted to jump into this today is because of the difference of opinion on how to best respond to the Trump tariffs. You have liberals in Ottawa and Premier Ford in Ontario, progressive conservative in Ontario, talking about restricting energy exports to the United States if Trump follows through with the tariff threat. In Ontario's case, that's electricity. Ontario exports a lot of electricity to states like Michigan and New York and Minnesota. And liberals in Ottawa, like Melanie Joly, the foreign minister, hasn't ruled out oil and gas exports from Alberta. But that be on the table as leverage. Either the taps be turned off to the United States or there should be an export tax on those shipments of oil and gas. And Ottawa seems to be under the impression that it has the authority to do this through the Canada Energy Regulator. And this is a complete and total non-starter for Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. And she said yesterday, this will cause a national unity crisis. And a little later, we'll play the audio again. I have heard Premier Smith in the past express her frustrations with liberals in Ottawa before, never to this degree. She said she was annoyed and irritated. She came across to me as angry and used the language of the Quebec separatists. She said something like, in Alberta, we've always tried to get along with Canada. That's the kind of talk you hear from a separatist in Quebec, that there's a Quebec and a Canada. Now the premier of Alberta is saying there's an Alberta and Canada. I mean, is this the state of this relationship now? So, I mean, if you are listening in Alberta today, first of all, thank you. But also you have a chance to speak to people in Atlantic Canada and vice versa. And you have a chance to speak to people in Ontario and help us understand this more. Why is Alberta so angry? Could it lead to the breakup of Canada? Should we be worried? 1-833-668-2577 is our call-in line. If you've never called before, just mention that to our call screener, and we will make your call a priority. 1-833-668-2577. Your calls are coming up next. I'm Rob Snow. It's Talkback. This is News Radio.
something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Yep, that's the number. This is the topic. It's national unity from a Western perspective. And what is driving the anger in Alberta? What is behind that? How seriously do you think we should take this idea of separatism in Alberta? Is it something that people in Eastern Canada should be worried about? Is it a small movement, nothing to worry about? Is it only because there's a Liberal government in Ottawa? Maybe a new Conservative government would improve the situation? Is there something about the culture in Alberta that people in the rest of Canada don't quite get or understand? 1-833-668-2577. Bill is in Calgary. Thanks for calling, Bill. You're on the air. What's your opinion, Bill?
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Hear you just fine, Bill. Go ahead.
Okay, so Quebec is getting $13 billion in transfer payments this year, and Alberta is
just
getting
an equalization.
Zero.
Yeah, that's
equalization,
right.
yeah. And Alberta is getting zero. And
that's right.
The Premier of Alberta has said that Alberta's oil is socially unacceptable to cross their province, so he didn't allow a pipeline. And BC kind of screwed us too by blocking off the pipeline from going to Burnaby. We had to fight for that, right? The government had, you know.
Yeah.
But it's those kind of things.
Government took it over, yeah.
Exactly, man. And the people out here, man, there's lots of jobs in Alberta, you know, and the oil patch has been the biggest employer over the years.
Yes.
And I grew up in Ottawa. And
you grew up in Ottawa. Okay.
Yeah, I joined the Army, and then I my last posting was Calgary, and I decided to stay out here because I like the mentality of the people out here, man. It's
and how is it different, say, from Ottawa, for example?
As soon as you get to the Manitoba-Ontario border, it becomes a welfare state, man. The government's giving everybody, the, welfare and child payments, and out here we're working for our living. And we don't really like it when the government sticks their hand into our pocket and says, we'll spend your money for you. I know how to spend my money. And to me, that's the beef out here. And especially to see Quebec continuously get treated with kids' gloves, you know, and like they're to keep them in the country, right? And so if Quebec can do that, why can't Alberta do that? That's what the mentality is. We just want the same treatment as Quebec.
Do you think in Eastern Canada, is this threat of separatism in Alberta, is this a real thing?
I don't hear about it much. I'm not really a big fan of our premier, but, you know, Notley before her was the premier conference that she went to. They didn't even listen to her. But I tell you, the premiers listened to Diane. I can't even remember her friggin' name right now.
Danielle Smith. Yeah.
Danielle
Smith. Yeah.
They don't just smile at her and condescend to her. They listen to her because she's got a voice, man.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your call, Bill.
Right now. You're welcome. Have a good day.
All the best. You too. Yeah. Fred on the air from Nova Scotia today. Hi, Fred.
Hi, Rob. Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. Well, this issue with Alberta, in my humble opinion, began with Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, in the National Energy Program. And I don't remember all of the details, but it was a major stink because the federal government, through their energy department, were taking excessive revenues, royalties from Alberta's energy. It was a big deal. I think the fight was with Premier Peter Lougheed at the time, but it was a major upset for Albertans. And I'm originally from Alberta, although I didn't spend many years there. Albertans are Canadians. They want to be a part of Canada, but they want to be treated equally. This is something we're having a lot of trouble with in our country today, is treating everybody on the same playing field. Your previous caller mentioned Quebec. I think they've use separatism to their advantage to get inordinate benefits from the country. For example, They do benefit from the transfer payments considerably, and Alberta is always a net loser. I believe every man, woman, and child in Alberta contributes $750 to the transfer payments for most of Canada. And more recently, Ontario, which used to be a net contributor, but I don't know where they stand now. But Quebec, for example, have a moratorium on their gas development. And that moratorium, They have lots of gas in southern Quebec, but that moratorium keeps them as a net recipient of the transfer payments. If they were to start to produce gas, of course, their revenues would go up and they would lose their transfer payments. This kind of behavior doesn't speak to national unity and that we're being treated the same. The same is true with their hydroelectric costs. They keep them artificially low in order to benefit from transfer payments because their bottom line is lower than it otherwise would be. Now, Justin Trudeau, Pierre Elliott Trudeau's son, has certainly not helped. Upper Canada has never treated the West. They've thought of themselves, Upper and Lower Canada, Quebec and Ontario, or Ontario and Quebec, have thought of themselves as the purveyors of the Confederation, and they need to change that attitude. It still exists, in my opinion, in Upper Canada. And out here, where I currently am in Nova Scotia, well, we don't have much to say about it because we're net recipients and we just continue to kowtow to whatever the Liberals want to keep them in power.
But a lot of people come from that part of the country. A lot of people, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but a lot of people do leave Atlantic Canada to seek employment in Alberta, especially in the oil sands.
Yes, they do, because we don't have the culture currently out here that's business-oriented. We need to change that. Nova Scotia, all of the Maritimes have to change that, including Newfoundland. They have to change that attitude. But it's the same old story, Rob. If you're receiving benefits, you tend to behave in a way that allows you to continue to receive benefits. Right, and that behavior often keeps you from free enterprise spirit and taking risks, etc.
Okay, very interesting, and maybe that explains part of the culture in Alberta. Maybe something that the rest of Canada doesn't quite understand. To one of my questions today, 1-833-668-2577. Thank you, Fred, in Nova Scotia today. More of your calls just ahead on Talkback on News Radio.
Something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Yes, it is. As we ask, what is driving the anger in Alberta? What's behind that? How seriously should we and the rest of the country take this threat of separatism in Alberta? Could a new Conservative government improve the situation? Is there something about the culture in Alberta that the people in the rest of Canada just don't understand? Let's get right back to the phones. Kelly is in Alberta, funny enough. Hello, Kelly.
Hello.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for calling. What's your opinion?
Caller there. Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
I hear you just fine.
Caller, like these transfer payments that we're making to Quebec and to Eastern Canada, like we're getting pretty sick of it. We're an oil patch business working, we're all working. And, between giving Eastern Canada all that money and between, we have to have a referendum. When do we end paying for the natives, like for our ancestors? When does that quit?
Okay, I'm not sure what you mean by that, sir.
Well, we're paying... like our treaties or whatever, we're paying for these treaties that people wrote 100 years ago. Right. And we keep paying. When does it end?
Okay. Is that driving some of the anger in Alberta, do you think?
Oh, for sure. Like everybody you talk to, it's getting to the point where like we just keep paying and paying and paying, and we're not receiving nothing for it.
Okay. Well, I guess the Indigenous would say we're receiving compensation for past wrongs.
Yeah, but the thing is, where do we draw the line? When do we say
draw the line?
Enough?
Okay.
You know,
okay.
like
When you say we need a,
put it this way.
excuse me. I just want to interrupt you. You said we need a referendum. What kind of referendum? A referendum on what?
A referendum like they did in Australia. They had a referendum and saying all people are equal. There's no more going back to keep going back to the cash cow. You know, all people are equal.
Okay,
Why
so
why can we not be all equal? You know, you take the indigenous people like we used to. I'm going back 30 years. We were trying to get people to come off the reserves and get them into towns to start mixing with people. Nowadays we have, you know, we never used to have schools on reserves. Now we got bigger schools than most schools on reserves, and it's all natives, and they're not intermixing with everybody else.
Okay. Yeah, that's a little bit off the topic today than what I'm talking about, but I appreciate, I guess, your opinion. 1-833-668-2577. We'll stop here and come back right after the news with more of your calls on Talkback. Western alienation, Western anger, the threat of separatism in Alberta, what's driving it, what's behind it, something about the culture in Alberta that the rest of us don't quite get or understand. Have your say. Love to hear from you on Talkback today on a Tuesday. On Now You Know, this is News Radio.
Something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
What's driving the anger in Alberta? What's behind that? How serious a threat is it to national unity? Is there something about the culture in Alberta that the rest of Canada doesn't quite understand? 1-833-668-2577. Kyle in Listowel on the line today. Hi, Kyle. Go ahead. What's your opinion?
Well, listen, I love Alberta. I wanted to move 18 years ago to St. Albert, Alberta. I thought it's a fantastic province. I've always had fun going there for skiing and stuff. But you know what? Right now, Canadians need to unite. And this whole fighting within our country about different provinces and certain provinces getting more things and, like Alberta apparently is being treated unfairly. It all needs to stop. We all need to work together right now. We need to become what we are, Canadians, together. And we have a problem going on south of the border, and we're now worried about a province separating from Canada to become its own country. Like, we don't need that. We need to really button up our pants and see what the issues are with Alberta and what they need and to cater to them and to say, you know what, Danielle, what would you like us to do? Because honestly, like the oil sector, sure, are we switching to EVs and stuff? Yes, but the oil sector in Alberta is the biggest, and I believe it's the biggest industry in that province. And the amount of money that province brings into Canada by selling oil to the States or wherever, vice versa and back. This is something that we cannot, just let it fly. This is one of our main drivers of bringing money into the country, and I think it's a very serious issue that we need to bring up and talk to Danielle Smith and like you said, the people of Alberta and what they want. But as an Ontarioan, I would like to just apologize to those in Alberta, and I'm sorry that it's going on with you guys because I love Albertans, and I would never want you guys to lead Canada, that's for sure. So thanks there, Rob.
All right. Okay. Kumbaya. Well, look, I mean, that's very good. I've covered a lot of news conferences in my time, but I don't think I've ever seen a premier so mad at a government in Ottawa as mad as Danielle Smith was yesterday. This idea that has been floated out there that in response to Trump tariffs, Ottawa would either curtail exports of oil and gas to the United States or put an export tax on that oil and gas. I mean, off the table, beyond the pale for the Alberta premier. Not impressed yesterday when she had a news conference, like a virtual news conference. She says If Ottawa moves to do that, it would create a national unity crisis. Let's listen to this again.
Well, I can't predict what Albertans would do, but as you know, the part of my strategy over the last 2 years has been to say that we can have a constructive relationship with Canada, and I would hope that would continue to be the case. Here's the thing I find irritating about Eastern politicians making that argument. The reason I find it irritating is because we could have had Energy East, which would have expanded our ability to support our friends in Eastern Canada and also been an export market off the East Coast. We could have had Northern Gateway, which would have expanded and supported export markets in a more substantial way off the West Coast. And Eastern politicians advocated against those things. And so we went to work on expanding our access to the United States with additional egress, with twinning, with looping. We did that because the rest of the country wasn't interested in having that conversation. So to now make the argument that that's a point of leverage is going to be very, very irritating, not only to me, but also to my fellow Albertans. If they want to start the conversation by saying, gosh, maybe we should have had Energy East and Northern Gateway. Let's restart that so that we're not so dependent on one customer. I am more than happy to have that conversation.
Danielle Smith yesterday, Premier of Alberta, she kept using the words irritating. I find it irritating. She sounds a little bit more than irritated to me. She sounds angry to me. Glenn is in Calgary. Hi, Glenn. You're on the air. What's your opinion here,
how
Glenn?
you doing?
Hi there. Good,
well,
Glenn.
I think
Thank
the
you.
history between Alberta and federal government goes back a long time, going back to Pierre Trudeau and Marc Lalonde with the National Energy Program, which really started all of this. And
that was 40 years ago.
And that's where a lot of this all started. And then you've got the federal government that's capping Alberta's oil production, basically saying, okay, you can only do so much of this and so much of that. And by the way, Quebec, we don't want your oil going through our province. BC says the same thing. And yet they are more than happy to take the revenue from the federal transfer payments that they get from all this oil that's moving down to the U.S. If they don't want to, basically, how would you say it, work together and not allow us to export natural gas and oil to Europe, which is trying to get off of Russian oil, but they would rather bring it in from Venezuela or Saudi Arabia, which are both oppressive regimes, than get it from their own country. You just got to try to shake your head. Why is that? And, okay, carbon tax is another big thing out here. Is the carbon tax working? What is the carbon tax? It's basically, like said on another show, it's a sin tax. Your gas is higher, but the carbon price, you're going to drive less and not less. Well, you get a rebate on a pack of smokes? No, you don't.
Yeah,
but
no, you don't.
No,
you don't. Yeah, I said that last week. Yeah.
The world is still going to need oil, petroleum. Reason being is you look at your electric vehicles. Where does all the plastic in that come from?
Of course,
petroleum. Where do your tires come from? Petroleum. The roads that you drive on the asphalt, where does that come from? Petroleum. So
sure. Just the mining. I imagine lithium mining is probably a pretty energy-intensive exercise, sir.
Yeah, but like I said, it's frustration that every time Alberta has an opportunity to grow, something happens in Ottawa or one of the other provinces, and it's stymied.
Okay.
We have the potential, Canada and Alberta, to be a global energy powerhouse. But because of one province in the east, one province in the west, and a federal government, that's never going to happen.
Do you think a new government would improve the situation, a conservative government?
Only if they could do something like look at getting the Energy East pipeline going and the West pipeline going, where we could export our oil and natural gas to Europe or to Japan, South Korea on the other side.
Okay. All right.
And that would benefit all Canadians because everybody would get a share of that revenue coming in. But no, we would rather keep increasing everybody's taxes at the federal level instead of getting more revenue coming in to give Canadians a better way of life and helping adding more programs and social nets for the rest of Canada. Okay. We would rather just tax the rest of Canada to death, including Alberta.
Gotta go. Thank you for having your say. I appreciate your call today from Calgary. We'll be right back. More of your calls just ahead. The state of the Federation today. Western anger. Have your say. 1-833-668-2577. Talkback here on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
What is driving the anger in Alberta? What's behind that? How serious is the threat of separatism in Alberta? Could a new government improve the situation? Something about the culture in Alberta that the rest of Canada doesn't quite understand. 1-833-668-2577. Doug is in Waterloo. Hi, Doug.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome.
I think I have some valid points that link all this together and make some answers.
Okay.
First off, Germany came here wanting to get some natural gas. Trudeau said, no, maybe when we got hydrogen. It would have meant $1 trillion to Canadian economy. A little while later, Japan came and made the same request, and Trudeau denied that. No, you can't have it. It would have meant over $1 trillion. So why?
Okay.
The last guy made so many valid points, but nobody's asked the question, why?
Okay.
I lived in 6 different states. I understand culturally what's going on there. And the difference that from being observing from the outside, no, I've never been to Alberta, is they think normally, rationally, that the rest of the country doesn't get. I talked to a gal I met in the fall. She went to Mexico with her fiance, and they asked her what country she was from, and she said that she was from Canada. They didn't understand that. She says, you're more like an American. You're outspoken. You're friendly. The Canadians just stick among themselves, look at the ground, and they're not very friendly. The reason that Miss Smith did you realize who she took with her? Kevin O'Leary and Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson has just recently moved to the United States where his daughter lives. Kevin O'Leary, when he's not up north in cottage country or traveling on business, he has a 2-bedroom house in downtown Boston. She took them along to say, hey, look, all these Canadians aren't idiots like those people in the East. They had to run away from there. They're trying to socially engineer Peterson so he can function in his trade when they want him to think. I think they were there
already. I think they were there already. But anyway, I don't think she took them there. I think they were probably there already. They were what I'm told.
Okay. Well, however they got there, she took examples of normality that backed up her position in Alberta and said they had to run and they're already living in your country. The reason that Trump is doing what he's doing, he's only mocking Canadians. You have to be very intelligent to play stupid. The rest of the country doesn't understand New York, the way New Yorkers live. He's just acting like a New Yorker. And the people in Ontario don't get that, and they say he's being rude. It's not. And she took some examples of people that think like people in Alberta and say, look, all Canadians aren't like that.
Okay, interesting. Thank you for your call, Doug. You've weaved together some ideas there. Ted in Calgary on the air today. Hi, Ted. Good to hear from you.
Hey,
what's your opinion?
Hey, Rob. Well,
hi.
I echo the opinion of the Premier. I also think that there's probably a third of, this is my own anecdotal kind of calculation, but I think there's probably a third of people here who are, I wouldn't say jumping on the bandwagon to separate, but are interested in hearing more about how that might work if.
Interesting.
If, right?
Okay.
So that's my own anecdotal opinion, but I guess the frustration that boils here is that successive liberal governments have been elected by the electorate in the East on platforms which basically truncate our oil industry. And, when you listen to the Premier saying we could have had an Energy East pipeline, we could have had a Gateway North pipeline, but the politicians, the Eastern politicians who were elected by on platforms that actually stifled the oil and gas industry, now everybody wants to be, Alberta, please come to our rescue. Alberta, please come to our rescue. Even though we weren't there for you when you needed the help the most.
But now we want to use your number one wealth creating industry as leverage in a trade battle with the Americans.
Exactly. And so Albertans are now saying, why don't we become the 51st state? You know, like that's where this is going. So unless Eastern Canada wants to help out and start to pay attention to the frustrations that are really real here, they might actually push that to the point where it really becomes
a problem.
Something that Alberta starts to think about more and more, right?
I think. Okay. I'm sorry, Ted. We'll have to wrap it up there. We're really tight on time here. I've got to kind of keep things on time here. Thank you. Very interesting points. I appreciate your call today. 1-833-668-2577. Right back on the phones when we come back on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Hey, but the anger in Alberta today and what's driving that, getting your ideas, 1-833-668-2577 with the overall topic being national unity. Darwin is on the line from Calgary. Thanks for calling, Darwin. You're on the air. What's your opinion?
It's a situation I believe it's been building for years. It's maybe coming to a head now. I've lived in Alberta for 40 years now, and it's little things like transfer payments, where I believe it's 7 or 8 years ago, where Quebec got about $9 billion in transfer payments, had a surplus where we had a deficit, and nothing was returned.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they want to make this fair for everybody, but that doesn't seem fair to me.
Yeah.
I
it's
actually
13 and a half. It's 13.5 billion this year, by the way. That will go to Quebec.
That's crazy. I mean, that's crazy, but yet I'm not sure how the voting system works. I mean, we just don't seem to have as much say because of the population as Central Canada does. So we can propose good things, but it gets shut down all the time. I actually had the pleasure of living in Ottawa for a couple of years in the early 80s when things kind of crapped out here in Alberta. I was framing houses at the time. And I tell you, for being a Canadian, I was never treated so poorly in my life when they found out I was from Alberta.
Oh, really?
Really looked down on like in a foreign country.
Really?
Yeah, and that's the honest goodness truth. And all the years, I mean, there's been a lot of people from Central Canada, Eastern Canada come out to Calgary to work. And that lot, most of them are, I would say 90% are pretty good, but it's a 10% of them. They just walk around with a chip on their shoulder like you wouldn't believe. Like a very entitled people, in my opinion. But that's where the Western Canadians, born and raised Western Canadians, don't have that. We want to get ahead.
So
go out and work.
Sure. This threat of separation in Alberta, is that something we should keep an eye on in this part of the country? What do you think?
I don't think it would ever happen. I'm sure.
You don't think so? Okay.
All
right. Well, that's good news.
I myself, personally, I'd like to keep Canada as a whole.
Sure.
But
so would I.
You can only be pushed so far, though. You can only be, beaten on so long.
Yeah, you can only punch somebody in the face so many times until they punch you back. All right, Darwin. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to take one more call. We'll get. I want to take one more call. Wade, just before the news. Wade, not a lot of time, so let's get right to the point. Wade, go ahead in Sylvan Lake.
Okay, you said she seemed angry. Well, if I watched the videos on X, and if anybody noticed, she was laying in bed. She had the pillows behind her, and she wasn't angry. She was right to the point, and she was right in my opinion. And she handled Melanie Jolie so nice. It was just. It was incredible. She said, go look at a map and see where Line 5 runs and see what happens when you shut that line off. And the other thing is our transfer payments out here. You know, Quebec gets all of this stuff and we get nothing. Last fall, the federal government said they were going to give us the number that they were going so we could explore having our own pension plan. Well, they put that off, and they put that off, and they put that off, and they still haven't given us a number. And Justin Trudeau is in love with Xi Jinping in China.
Okay, gotta go.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
So we've been talking about national unity from a Western perspective today and asking what is driving the anger in Alberta, what's behind that, how serious should we take these threats that we hear from time to time about a separatist movement in Alberta, for example. Is that something the rest of the country should worry about, in your opinion? Is there something about the culture in Alberta that people in the rest of Canada don't quite understand? I want to get right back to our phone lines right now. 1-833-668-2577. Karen in Calgary, welcome to hour number 2 of Talkback. Thanks for waiting. Go ahead. What's your opinion?
Well, where do I start? I'm a 60-year-old Albertan, born and bred in Alberta, and we have never been treated fairly by Eastern Canada in my entire life. We've never gotten any votes. We never get any representation. You just tell us what you're going to do. $13 billion to Quebec. BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan get zero money from those transfer payments. Western Canada's supporting Eastern Canada's champagne budget, and we're getting pretty tired of it.
Okay. Well, you did Mr. Harper was in power for almost 10 years, ma'am.
And?
He was a Calgary member of Parliament.
Yes.
Right? Yes.
And?
Yes.
Did we get anything?
Do you think?
No, we still paid the same amount of money. Why? Because there's no votes here. There's no votes. And look at, do you know who's going to run for voting now? Carbon tax Carney's going to try to run in, the other Randy's riding now.
Well, yeah, there are reports he wants to run in an Edmonton area riding.
Yeah.
Right?
The other Randy, Randy Boissonneau, the other Randy that's disappeared. The other thing I just want to say is,
if he's going to run in Alberta, there just aren't many. There are many places in Alberta for a Liberal to run right now, I gather.
Well, we don't want them.
Okay.
We just want to be represented fairly, like all Canadians. Just because I'm not a Liberal doesn't mean I don't deserve to be represented.
Sure. Okay. This idea of separation, how do you feel about that?
Hey, you know what? You push us far enough, we'll leave. I'm tired of, seriously, I never thought I would say it. I'm tired of paying all this money, getting shit on, by all of Eastern Canada. That's all they do. And then they whine and complain because guess what the culture is in Alberta? We work for a living. We don't have our hands out waiting for cash.
Okay, ma'am. Very passionate about the opinion. Thank you.
Absolutely,
Appreciate
100%.
Yep. Okay. Yep. All well and good. We love the passion around here. Not the profanity though. We can do without that. Thank you so much. But obviously, equalization, a very sore spot. The federal government has always said Alberta is not sending money to Quebec. It's the federal government. And money comes from the federal government that goes to Quebec and other have-not provinces. And it's all based on something called fiscal capacity. The question is, would the federal government have that, fiscal capacity without the wealth creation in Alberta and the other have provinces? I don't claim to understand the formula. I don't know how the federal government determines who is a have and a have-not province. I will tell you this year, again, Alberta gets nothing. And, Quebec gets $13.5 billion. Quebec, the province, has an unemployment rate of 5.6%. Alberta has an unemployment rate of 6.7%. The Quebec City, the unemployment rate in that city, 5.6%. The unemployment rate in Calgary, 7.8%. Quebec goes to Ottawa, says, we need money for newcomers. Trudeau cuts a check for $500 million. The West says, we need money for newcomers. Mr. Trudeau won't even pick up the phone. Which provinces to have, which provinces to have not. I can't figure it out. But maybe it helps explain some of the anger because people keep bringing it up. 1-833-668-2577. Tom in Cambridge, you're on the air. Tom, what's your opinion today?
How are you doing, Rob? Well, I've been
Tom.
listening here, and I'm trying to figure something. When Alberta was going through the boom and they had their Heritage Fund, it was very different back then because Albertans were getting something like $500 or $600 a month from Premier Lougheed due to the oil. Now things have changed over the years. When Harper was in government and the oil bottomed out at $20 a barrel and companies closed up, someone's paying for all the cleanup for all the abandoned oil mines and fields out there. And I'm trying to figure out, there's a lot of Easterners that were transplanted out west and from the East Coast because there was no jobs out there. And it's sort of twofold. I can understand because Albertans think it's Eastern Canada. Well, let's be specific here. A lot of it, and even I'm in Ontario, aren't exactly how happy how Quebec has been given special treatment. And that was due to a referendum that was done by Mr. Brian Mulroney, if I'm not mistaken. And when Quebec wanted to separate, I remember, and it was Justin's dad said, well, if you want to separate, just remember this, that you will have no longer be involved in the Canadian currency. You won't have any health benefits through Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to rattle the separation sword, just think about this. And as regards when Ms. Smith wanted to pull out of the Canada pension plan and thought Alberta was going to get back 75%, they're only going to get back 25% of what they contribute into the pension plan.
Well, nobody knows. Nobody knows that number. They won't release the number.
I watched it on City TV here, and it came back that the speculation was 56%, and they came out at 25%.
Well, speculation is speculation.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, but that's just what are the real issues here? It's like Alberta has no provincial sales tax. Yes, there's hard workers out there. The reason why there's no pipelines being built anywhere is not because it's the environmental issues, and the reason why Quebec doesn't want any oil coming through their province is because of the tragic accident that happened in Quebec with the rail car, which is not.
Well, it shouldn't matter if Quebec wants a pipeline or not, because pipelines are totally 100% federal jurisdiction, sir.
Well, and then we also have the Indigenous people who maybe that pipeline is going to run through their property. So don't we have a few problems here that isn't just Eastern problems, because you've also got to consider the Indigenous people, how they're going to be compensated, or if they'll be compensated. So there's a lot of issues here. And we're supposed to pose united front.
And with a project like Trans Mountain, with projects like Northern Gateway, some Indigenous leaders wanted it and others didn't.
So then the problem lies there, not with the federal government. Would you not agree with that?
No, I wouldn't agree with that, because the only duty that the federal government has is to adequately consult. But it's still up to the federal government.
Well, okay, but I will agree with that as well. But that is where some of the stuff lies within. Is that who do you really want to tick off? And who's going to pay the price here? And if we're going to be a united front here, we're all going to suffer some pain one way or another. But it'd be like Newfoundland saying, okay, why aren't we being treated fairly? We have Hibernia, or the oil project out in the Hibernia Sea out there, but they're not making any money off of that right now either. And Alberta could sell their oil and that stuff a lot more than they're paying, than the Americans are paying for, but they don't do that either. And you're not going to build.
We got to run. Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm over time, so we'll have to wrap it up there. Thank you for your call, though. Good to hear from you. Bye-bye. 1-833-668-2577. Talkback hour number 2. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
What is driving the anger in Alberta? Let's go to Clay in Calgary. Clay, you're on the air. What's your opinion here, Clay? What's going on with the
Hi, Rob.
state
How
of
are you?
affairs? No, I'm good, Clay. Thank you.
I just think back to the last election, like the federal election, and Trudeau didn't even come to Alberta or Saskatchewan to
campaign,
look for votes or even just like anything with his campaign trail. And I don't think Alberta needs to separate. I think the frustration comes from the fact that there were alternatives to just exporting our oil and stuff to the States. Like we could have done something across Canada, but I mean, like Trudeau has this distaste for anything Alberta. I don't understand why the Liberals don't even come and campaign in Alberta or Saskatchewan. Because like if I have a leader and I can vote on a Conservative or NDP or even Green Party, I wouldn't vote Green Party, but like has that leader come and campaigned in my province? Yes. Or has this guy not even come and shared his
not even bothered?
Doesn't bother in the last election. Right. It's like, how do I vote for anything else?
Okay, interesting, Clay. Thank you for your call, Clay. Ignored, basically. Herman in Calgary as well. Hi, Herman. Thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Thank you, and I have to agree with the last caller entirely. But it's not just being ignored. Doug Ford, God bless his soul, and says, "Oh, we have to retaliate." Okay, we can retaliate. Maybe we put export restrictions and that sort of stuff. He's not going to touch the automobile industry, but he's more than happy to suggest we can restrict the flow of oil, Alberta's largest product and commodity that we produce here, largest industry, to the United States. So how on earth can Alberta take the rest of the country seriously when it's always Alberta gets shoved down? Stephen Harper, you kind of challenged a previous caller on the fact, well, Stephen Harper was Prime Minister for nearly 10 years. That's true. And there's a lot of Albertans here who are quite upset with Mr. Harper, although he's the favorite son, that he didn't implement the firewalls memo. Guess who's implementing the firewalls memo now? And
well, I would say Danielle Smith is certainly moving in that direction. Yeah.
But that's really the point. And when you take a look what's in the firewalls memo, what Danielle Smith is doing with the Sovereign Alberta within United Canada Act, you take a look at all of the little pieces, you knit them together, you tell me, what is Alberta asking for that Confederation hasn't already ceded to Quebec and in large part to Ontario? And if you can't come up with one thing, do we really have a confederation?
Yeah.
There's either equality
such an interesting point.
Or there isn't equality amongst the provinces. And if you were insisting that, certain provinces are less equal than others, we don't have a confederation. We don't have a country. Maybe it's just time to get on with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing that angle up. Stephen Harper, Tom Flanagan, and others in the firewall letter. We need to build firewall. We need to build a firewall around Alberta. They were 25 years ago or so. To protect Alberta, they said, from a hostile government in Ottawa. They viewed the government in Ottawa as hostile. And Alberta should have a pension plan. Alberta should have its own police force. Alberta should have its own income tax collection bureaucracy, like Revenue Quebec. And it's you have seen the UCP government float ideas like the Alberta pension plan. Provincial police force. I never understood the opposition to a provincial police force in Alberta. That faced such backlash. I never really understood that. Ontario has the Ontario Provincial Police. Quebec has Sûreté de Québec. Newfoundland and Labrador has its own police force, Newfoundland Constabulary. I never quite understood all this opposition to Alberta having its own provincial police force. Yeah, but that firewall letter 25 years ago, all of the same things are still around, aren't they? And so are some of the ideas for possible remedies. And it is like taking a page out of the Quebec playbook. Okay? Quebec has its own pension plan, its own tax collection agency, Revenue Quebec, its own police force, massive energy utility, the profits of which are not included in equalization, $3 billion plus last year, right to the government of Quebec from Hydro-Quebec last year, never included in the equalization formula. And Quebec is unilingual, not multicultural, and is never challenged over that, and is actually rather unapologetic about it. And yet when these sort of things come up in the Alberta context, Alberta is accused of not playing nice in the sandbox. I'm Rob Snow. It's Talkback. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Hickey in Calgary up next on the anger in Alberta today from a national unity perspective. What's your opinion on what's going on here? Hickey, go ahead.
I don't think that that Alberta wants to separate, but you look at what happened with Quebec back in the day. They felt they weren't being taken care of or treated fairly, and they started separation, and now they seem to be the golden child. When you think about things like Hydro-Quebec, they built this massive dam, and then they tried to send all their power to the states, and the two states right below them pretty much said, no, you're not going to run, 100 miles through a boreal forest. And so they sort of had to go around and figure out what they were doing. And it's the same thing with Alberta. I mean, why should we send our oil off of the BC coast all the way down to the Panama Canal and then all the way back up to get to Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, so that we can refine it over there? Like, it just doesn't make sense that we're doing that on ships when we're talking about the environment and everything like that, when Quebec says, no, we don't want to, run a pipeline across our province. If you remember back a couple of years ago, Alberta had to send a whole bunch of rail cars to Quebec when Quebec had that massive deep freeze, and they ran out of liquefied natural gas or propane. And we helped them out. But if we had a pipeline that went all the way across Canada to do liquefied natural gas and oil and everything that we need, and it was a federal pipeline, then all of a sudden we have access to both the East Coast and West Coast, and we can start running Canada as an entity in the G7 to really start utilizing our natural resources, increasing our GDP, and helping us as a country, rather than we're like 13 roommates stealing each other's sandwiches out of our dorm room.
Okay. All right, Hickey. You always have such a turn of phrase. I really enjoy taking your calls. Thank you. Bill in Calgary up next. Bill, you're on the line, Bill.
Hey, Rob. How are you today?
Hi. I'm good. Thank you.
Good. So, I find a couple of things. I agree mostly with most of the callers that have been calling in. One of the things I wanted to make certain was clarified is that I like Rob Ford. He's an
Doug
okay
Ford,
guy
yeah.
in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, Doug Ford, sorry, yeah. But when he talks about playing with energy in terms of tariff negotiations, he's talking about hydro. He's not talking about oil and gas. He's never once mentioned oil and gas, as far as I know.
No, but Jolie didn't rule it out in a weekend interview.
Here's the issue, and here's what makes me really angry as an Albertan. Watching Danielle Smith have to school the federal government on how our pipelines run and how they operate, that's pathetic. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, if I was prime minister of the country and I had a premier who got a meeting with Donald Trump, and I'm either at the table or you're not going, period. I would not allow premiers to just do whatever the heck they want without us at the federal table being there as well. So, in fact, I would fire my foreign minister in that instant if I'd seen that happen. It's quite apparent that the NDP and the Liberal really have no conception of how our energy works in Alberta and vis-a-vis the rest of the country. And the simple fact of the matter is they've been so busy shutting Alberta in when they don't realize that all these wonderful programs that they're bringing in, put a Northern Gateway and put an East Link in, and Keystone, and you now have upwards of $500 billion a year in extra resource, extra money to pay for these programs. We wouldn't be in deficit; we'd be in a surplus. And this is our opportunity. That was our opportunity to literally control. Keystone would have provided North America with the ability to control the world prices.
Gotta go.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
We've been talking about national unity today, not from the Quebec perspective, but rather from the Alberta perspective and the growing anger in Alberta. And we've also been asking, is there just something in the culture in Alberta that people in the rest of Canada don't quite understand? A lot of people have mentioned something that Alberta Premier Danielle Smith brought up yesterday, this idea of curtailing exports to the United States if there's tariffs from Donald Trump. And this was something that was suggested by Melanie Joly, the foreign affairs minister, in a weekend interview. She was asked and didn't deny that it's on the table. All options are on the table, she said. And Alberta Premier Danielle Smith said, well, I don't think that option should be on the table. Be careful what you wish for, Ontario and Quebec. Let's listen to this.
Oil and gas is owned by the provinces, principally Alberta, and we won't stand for that. And you should never, ever threaten something you cannot do. And I would encourage the minister to look at a map of where Line 5 goes. Line 5 comes down through Michigan to get to Sarnia. And then that feeds the bulk of the supply needed for Ontario and connects with Line 9, which feeds the bulk of the product needed for Quebec. And so if you cut off that line, you are cutting off Ontario and Quebec. So I would encourage the ministers to either understand how our integrated pipeline system works and start looking at ways that we would be able to practically respond, because there's no point in making empty threats that cannot be executed on.
Premier Smith yesterday. Back to the phones today. Dave in Calgary. Thanks for calling, Dave. Hi there, Dave. Hello, Dave. No, I believe we have lost Dave. Let's go to Keith in Ottawa. Thanks for hanging in there, Keith. Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, Keith. Thank you.
Well, I can't blame Alberta feeling the way they do. I mean, this past federal government has done everything to restrict oil and gas supplies and wants to restrict it even more in the future. My opinion is that if we'd had these other places to send oil and gas to, well, maybe we could selectively keep them from going down to the States. But we don't have any other options, do we, right now? We don't have much. We don't. It's a way of pipeline to export our stuff. And what gets me is Carney on the Stewart show. Apparently, Carney's going to be announcing his running for the Liberal leadership in Edmonton on Thursday. That's what the rumor has. But on the Stewart show, Stewart brought up about the oil and gas going to the States, and he was sort of regretting the footprint of the oil that is going down there, and he would just like to see it cut off completely. So I'm just curious to see how he's going to run that by when he announces he's going to run for the leadership in Edmonton, of all places.
I mean, he'll have to explain his position on things like the carbon tax, how he views the oil and gas sector in Canada, how serious he is about getting to net zero. All of this he will have to answer for.
And
all
also,
of these
the other
positions.
point I want to bring up is: are you going to expect Quebec to shut off their hydro? And they just signed an agreement with Newfoundland to export more hydro, and it wouldn't be very luck for their plans if they were to cut back on their hydro, and I can't see how they would agree to that. I mean, why should Alberta have to cut back on their oil and Quebec is not going to do the same with their hydro.
Well,
Anyways,
yeah, it's interesting.
Opinion.
It'd be good to put a camera and a microphone in front of Premier Legault and ask him if where do you stand? In 2023, they had almost record profits at Hydro-Quebec, $3.3 billion at Hydro-Quebec, right into the treasury, into Quebec City.
That's right. He's already.
Are they really going to forego that kind of revenue?
Hydro.
Yeah. Okay. We have some lines available. Thank you, Keith, in Ottawa. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. I mean, there is this feeling among some Liberals in central Canada and eastern Canada that you're underappreciating the Liberals. And you don't realize really how good Mr. Trudeau's government was to Alberta. This is the spin that is out there now. People are trying to make this case as, I don't know, part of the early writing of Justin Trudeau's legacy, that Justin Trudeau was actually good for Alberta. That this is how this narrative goes. National Observer had a column to this effect a week ago from Max Fawcett, headlined, "The oil and gas sector will miss Justin Trudeau." No, really. That was the headline. And he noted in his column, Alberta's oil production up by more than 1 million barrels a day. On Justin Trudeau's watch, he notes the completion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline from northern Alberta down into Burnaby, although that project had to be nationalized after Kinder Morgan kind of waved the white flag, was always my impression, just fed up with everything that was going on in Canada and protests and constant changes in rules and regulations. And it was years behind schedule, and it cost tens of billions of dollars more. I mean, tens of billions of dollars more. I think it was $33 billion for a pipeline, something like that. He also notes LNG Canada in Kitimat, BC. So that, like, the early take on Trudeau's legacy for people who like Trudeau is that he was actually good to the oil and gas sector, not just Alberta's oil and gas sector, which is funny because I've never heard anyone who actually works in the oil and gas sector share that opinion, that Trudeau was great for the industry. The prevailing opinion from people who have ever called me on this issue is that the oil and gas sector is doing okay despite all the attempts by the Trudeau government to punish it with policies like emissions caps and industrial pricing schemes for carbon and anti-tanker bills and anti-pipeline bills. But there is this idea out there. Trudeau wasn't really bad for you people in the West, and your anger is misplaced. I'm not saying that's how I feel. I'm just saying it is a sentiment that is out there, perhaps more in this part of the country. 1-833-668-2577. More of your phone calls coming up next on Talkback here on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
What's driving the anger in Alberta? Clyde is there. Let's ask him. Hi, Clyde. What's your opinion today?
Same one it was last week. Yes. Alberta should separate.
Okay.
If it was
Really?
up to the rural vote, not urban vote, rural vote, I am in the rural area. I am a farmer. I think we would go 100% to separate. The urban I can't speak for. But I was amazed today when I tried to phone in and the line was busy. This is a pretty hot subject, and I'm glad it's been raised by you.
Okay.
And
okay.
Yeah, I think the Alberta and Saskatchewan just fed up. That's all there is to it. And
Fed up
hear more about it
with
all
what?
along.
Fed up with what?
The East.
East.
Just fed up with Trudeau and the East and all that stuff.
Right. Okay.
What you've been talking about.
Sure. Okay.
I'm 72 years old. I went through 2 Trudeaus. The first one was enough for Alberta. We didn't need a second one.
You should get a T-shirt for that, Clyde.
The thing is, he's gone. So now let's deal with the consequences of a $62 billion deficit, and get on with life. And let's look forward. It's like you've got cancer and you've been given a clean bill of health, right? That's what it's like for me, and I think that's what it's like for a lot of Albertans.
Right.
And Smith, they're picking on Smith for talking to Trump. You know, there's an old saying, you keep your friends close, but you keep your enemies closer. What's she got to lose by talking to him?
Of course. Oh, of course. Right? Mr. Trudeau was there 2 weeks before her. So,
yeah, but Trudeau isn't going to have any effect on Trump. I mean, Smith...
Well, I don't know. She sounded pretty confident that those tariffs are coming in.
Trump has no... He said.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, we'll see what happens on the 20th.
I don't think any world leader has any use for Trudeau.
Okay. We'll see what happens on Monday. The swearing in is on Monday, and then what happens after that and whether those tariffs are coming. And let's hope that they can be avoided, although it doesn't look like they can be avoided. Even Premier Smith said as much yesterday. Brenda up next. Brenda. Hi, Brenda.
Hi there.
Hi.
I've been working in the oil industry in Calgary for over 40 years.
Okay.
We had our first recession when Pierre Trudeau decided that he wanted to have 51% of oil and gas governed by Canada. So he made Petro-Canada. Then we've had the sun come in. And he has really not done anything. Yes, he did the pipeline. Woohoo! But how long did it take him to do it? By that time, we had already suffered, and we were going down. And we're in such a recession right now, and people in Calgary are suffering. But it seems that we're paying Quebec for their subsidy that we're supposed to pay every year. But nobody thinks that maybe people in Calgary and people in Alberta are suffering, and it's time that we stop subsidizing Quebec.
Okay. This is a real sore spot for a lot of the callers today, is what they view as this imbalance in equalization that Quebec is getting. Well, the latest number is $13.5 billion, and you guys are getting a big fat zero again.
Exactly. And I said, our food banks are overrun. We have people living on the streets.
That's a situation that's happening all across the country. That's not just an Alberta thing.
But we're not. But it doesn't seem to be recognized that we have problems in the West because we've got oil and gas. Well, do you know what? We're just like every other province, except we are hurting, and our oil and gas, it went down. We were at one time when we weren't drilling. The companies were not drilling because it was too much to drill and not enough revenue coming in. And we have lost so many big oil companies, and so many oil companies have gone under because we needed that pipeline to come in for earlier. We need the pipeline that goes from BC going south, and we're not getting it.
All right, so you heard the previous caller, Clyde, said if it was up to just rural Alberta voters, Alberta would be its own thing. It would go its own way.
When Pierre Trudeau was in,
really?
My parents, yes. My parents and I tried to join the Separatist Party when Pierre was in. We got told one day we were going out of our house, and we got told if we went to the meeting, we would be arrested. We moved to the States for a while, and my parents passed away, and I came back. But I'm a firm believer in separating. Let Saskatchewan and Alberta separate. See where Canada is without the oil and gas, and maybe they'll respect us a little bit more and help us out when we do truly need help. But I'm a firm believer in separating.
I've got to go. Thank you, Brenda. Wow, very interesting. Thank you. Good to hear from you today. 1-833-668-2577. I'm Rob Snow. It's Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
And let's get right to Sharon because we're a little tight on time as we wind down Talkback here on this Tuesday. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, Rob. Thank you for having me talk. I'm a little nervous, so
that's okay.
One of the reasons Albertans are upset and believe they're being treated unfairly if you went back to the records, it's really hard to find them now. Quebec collected $52 billion in federal income taxes and kept 100% of it in 2016. The federal government then paid Quebec $16 billion in transfer payments. Then, on top of that, Quebec received $10 billion in equalization payments for a total of $78 billion. 2016, Alberta paid $48 or $49 billion in federal income taxes and received about $28 or $29 billion in transfer payments back, zero in equalization payments. Alberta was hurting for 2 years or more, running more than 2 years, running deficits after the price of oil dropped in 2014 to $30. Alberta never, ever received an equalization payment.
Couldn't understand that. Never understood
and
that.
The WTI was around $55 in 2018, but Alberta was only receiving from the U.S. $37 a barrel or less. There was a huge differential in the price.
Oh, yeah, there still
US
is.
The U.S. was buying our oil and then selling it at world price and making a huge profit. We didn't get the WTI price until Rachel Notley imposed a cap on production in Alberta. But also going back to Quebec, Daniel, in 2018, I wrote Rachel Notley regarding equalization payments, and she came back and said to me, in Alberta, I'm quoting her, in Alberta, every woman, man, woman, and child contributes an average of $5,148 to our country more than we receive back in federal services. This is 6 times more per person than the next largest contributor.
That was Rachel Notley who said that?
That was Rachel Notley that said that.
Wow. Okay.
In
That's interesting.
November 12, 2019, when Daniel Smith was still a radio talk show host, she interviewed a guest, Jermaine Belzile, I don't know how to pronounce it, senior associate researcher at Montreal Economic Institute. He said from 1945 to 1965, Quebec was catching up to the rest of Canada, and it stopped more or less when we chose, meaning Quebec chose, the Quebec model, which was a very socialistic model. The government of Quebec basically made a decision to have Quebec be a welfare province. He disagreed with it.
Well,
he said if Quebec exported electricity, it wouldn't be good for them because they would lose their equalization payments. He also said that Quebec had, prior to COVID, Quebec had been running 6 years.
So for you, all very interesting, We're just right up against the clock here. For you, it's about fairness, right?
Yes.
And one province being more fair. Thank you. Look, thank you for all your calls. Thank you for your interest in that topic. I really appreciate it. Learn a few things along the way as well. And that's why we love doing Talkback and hearing from you each and every day, and we'll do it again tomorrow. Very busy news day. Lots of stuff to bring you right up to date on. We'll do that next. This is News Radio